feature presentation.
Welcome back to another Untitled TIFF review. I am one of your hosts, Matt Rohrbeck, alongside, he's allergic to tomatoes, but he is tomato meter approved, Eric Marchin.
Matt, I'm ready to get intellectually stimulated.
Oh, I'm already intellectually stimulated. It's day 2 of the Toronto International Film Festival. Will this podcast have a 15-minute intermission?
One can hope.
I think everything should have a 15-minute intermission, no matter how long it is. But yes, today we are reviewing Brady Corbet's The Brutalist. All 3.5 hours of it. Almost 4,
Yes.
right? With the intermission. I think it was almost like 3:45.
Started at 9:45 in the morning, ended at what, like 1:30?
Yeah, it was... definitely took a lot out of us in a
Yes.
good way.
Yeah.
Definitely
A journey.
Yeah, definitely a journey.
Or is the destination the most important thing?
Yeah, I can't wait to talk about this. How are you doing though on day 2?
I'm tired.
I feel like it's a recurring theme. If you go back from every review we've ever done during TIFF, I feel like the first thing is like, I'm tired.
Yeah. Well, I think it's
I'm all right actually right now.
mentally,
I shotgunned
like
a
in terms
iced
of like
coffee,
absorbing information and
Yeah.
trying to kind of keep it saved for doing this, but then also keep it saved possibly for interviews, and then also just thinking about like, you want to savor certain things, especially when it's something like this, because we'll get into it, and I this isn't a spoiler if you follow us on Twitter or anything like that. We love this movie.
Yeah,
it's really
fantastic,
good.
yeah.
And Brady Corbet, who co-wrote and directed this film, this is the 3rd movie that he has done. He is an actor turned director. Childhood of a Leader and Vox Lux are his previous 2 movies, both of which have garnered cult status and fans. And in terms of his approach, I don't know too much about him in terms of like his influences or his personality, the way that a lot of filmmakers kind of interject themselves within pop culture after they've had a breakout.
I feel like those first 2 movies kind of went under the radar, right?
Yeah,
like,
but they do have fans.
I mean, I love
Yes.
both of them,
Yeah.
right? Like I remember, I don't know how he got put on my radar. Did I see Vox Lux first and then I went back to Childhood of a Leader? Yeah, I think Vox Lux.
Because Childhood of a Leader popped up on Netflix not too long after Vox Lux got a release through Neon and Elevation Pictures here in Canada.
Yeah, and I remember just being very caught off guard when I saw Vox Lux, going into it not, knowing much about it or Brady Corbet, other than knowing he's popped up as an actor here and there as a character acter.
Yeah, he's probably best known, I guess, for Michael Haneke's remake of Funny Games,
right? Yeah,
with Michael Pitt as the 2 psychopaths in that film. But then there was like that year where he was in Force Majeure, Clouds of Sils Maria, Eden, and it just like there was like this joke that the one year that all those movies played at TIFF, it's like it was like see all of the films that he has small roles in. Yeah,
and I remember immediately after seeing Vox Lux just being like, oh, I'm on the same wavelength as this dude. Like, if anyone knows
you're on the Vox Lux train.
Yeah, if you've listened to us for a long time, you kind of understand what Eric vibes with, what I vibe with, what we both vibe with. And aesthetically, Brady Corbet's stuff is exactly what I kind of love, at least from a how it's put together and with the overture and the epilogues and the chapters and the tight, cool like.
Well, these are cinematic events. I think these are event films. I think these are movies that feel on the level of someone like a Paul Thomas Anderson, where the look, the feel of it is completely cinematic. It's engrossing. It brings you into the world of the character.
Feels also big and important and everything.
But also the time.
Yeah.
Like, I think we'll be talking a lot about this, is that this movie looks and feels of the time that it is depicting on screen, from the 1940s into the 60s, and then an epilogue in 1980. It like, even though the actors are of now, people we recognize like Adrian Brody, Guy Pearce, Felicity Jones, Joe Alwyn, the look and the feel of it, the even just the small little designs of a furniture store
Totally,
logo
yeah.
feel of post World War II America.
Yeah.
And it just we're talking about with The Life of Chuck, where authenticity and continuity can sometimes take you out of it if you don't have the proper product placement or
Production design. Yeah.
And it can feel maybe too modern or not period appropriate. But everything here feels of that time.
And I think being shot on film is a huge part of that as well,
Yes.
right? Shot on 65.
Lo Crowley, who's the cinematographer here, also shot Noah Baumbach's White Noise, a movie that I know you're very fond of.
Oh yeah.
But he also has this very textured, rich look that when you watch it in a theater like the Lightbox and on film in VistaVision,
I love that. I love that shit.
You really do get the full experience.
Yeah, and that's what I love about all three of his films. And I really think that this is his coming out party. And I really do think that this will put him on the map as a big, important filmmaker, in-demand filmmaker. I don't know, I absolutely loved every single element of this. It feels grand and big, this big American epic that's meticulously paced and
the American dream, right?
Yeah.
It's an immigrant story. It's the American dream. It begins very much like something like The Godfather Part 2, where we learn of Don Corleone's upbringing, but then we also see sort of the cut in between of Michael taking the position of being the Godfather, and the way that we see Adrian Brody's character Laszlo Toth come to America from Hungary, escaping both the Soviets and the Germans and the camps, and him trying to find a better life for himself and his wife, who's played by Felicity Jones, and in terms of reestablishing himself, but finding that balance because he's entering the U.S., which is very much a Christian nation, a place where anybody who is a foreigner or someone that is the other is not as welcomed. And so that's the story that it is also telling, on top of this very weird and integral kind of and complicated relationship between this affluent hot-headed, quote-unquote, well-read businessman, Robert Van Buren, played by Guy Pearce, and probably, I think, one of his best performances.
Oh God, he's so good. He's so good.
As one of the great villains. He's playing it in a way that's almost by way of John or Danny Huston in terms of the grandeur of it. But he commissions or hires Laszlo Toth to basically build this community center.
Because Laszlo was an architect back in Budapest.
Yes. And his style is of brutal architecture, of kind of a postmodernism and cool and clinical. Basically, like a lot of what we see now. I mean, Toronto feels like very much filled with it. We just
watched, Universal Language, the Matthew Rankin film, filled with brutalist kind of architecture that's kind of
it's very like industrial and gray and futuristic in a way, where and the designs are somewhat, they're not homely or kind of classic, and for a place like Pennsylvania, they really stand out because it's such a rural landscape, but you kind of see the evolution of Laszlo as he comes to America and first lives with his cousin, who's played by Alessandro Nivola, and his wife, and they work. They have this kind of small furniture shop, store, and you see there's this interesting conversation where when Nivola first meets Brody's character, they're talking to each other. In Hungarian, right?
I believe so.
Yeah. As worldly as we are.
We don't speak anything but English.
Yes,
so.
This goes to the.
There's many languages in the film. Yeah.
But they're having a conversation. But then as soon as they get to the furniture store, the cousin only speaks in English, and they have this conversation about, oh, well, both of them being Jewish, but then the cousin has not only married a Christian woman, he has now been assimilated into the Christian lifestyle. The
Even
way that
his
he
accent's
speaks
kinda
is
gone,
American, even though she says he sounds unlike any American she's ever heard. But compared to what Brody hears, he sounds very American in that way. So, like that, I think like the subtleties in terms of, looking at how America changes people or doesn't welcome them, and sort of the resistance or the give and take of, collaboration, but then also feeling as though, you're disconnected and disenfranchised in a world that isn't completely welcoming to outsiders.
Yeah. I think I tweeted this out, but I was like, you already mentioned Guy Pearce, but I think both Guy Pearce and Adrian Brody, I said they were like redefining like performances, because these are two guys that, had their moments, both of them at different times.
Well, very close to each other, because like Guy Pearce, like in '97, was in L.A. Confidential, and that was a big movie for both him and his fellow countryman Russell Crowe. Yeah. And that was like the beginning for him, and then obviously Memento was like his big
he's great in Memento
movie, and then obviously that was also a big deal for Christopher Nolan. And then Adrian Brody, was in stuff like Steven Soderbergh's King of the Hill in the mid '90s, and then in the late '90s you had Liberty Heights with the Barry Levinson movie. Ben Foster's also in that film. And then obviously Roman Polanski's The Pianist, in which he won the Oscar. And then after that, it felt like for a minute there, Hollywood was trying to make him
a big deal.
Maybe not a movie star, but a leading man in, a lot of genre stuff, whether it be King Kong or in Predators. And it just didn't really work out for him. But then he kind of had a second life as a repertory actor in Wes Anderson films, and he's very good in those movies.
Yeah, he is. So it was just lovely to see both of those guys get like really, really good roles again and showcase that they still got it, and they absolutely crush it. And I think that this is on an epic in every sense of the word, decade spanning kind of. I was just kind of floored by the whole thing. Like, the score is incredible. We already mentioned the cinematography. It's pacing even at 3.5 hours. I think the intermission really helps. Bring back the intermission. I will hammer that home. Even in a 75-minute movie, give me an intermission at the 30-minute mark. It was just I think the first half is probably I don't want to even use the term better, but like I did in the second half start to feel the length a little bit, and I was like fully engrossed in that first half, where in the second half I was going, okay, let's see where this goes, or let's get this going, but not in any, like, again, I was still completely engaged with the material, and it's something that so easily could be very dry or kind of boring, and and especially with me, it doesn't seem like on paper something that, like, if you just said, I don't know, it's just not something.
If you're not an architect, you might not get anything out of it.
That's what I mean.
But I think it's so good at convincing you about the process. Like, it takes time to show you how things are made, and also
if you're anyone who creates anything, you kind of know, you kind of relate to that a little bit, I think.
Yeah, and I think specifically how there's this very fine line between both passion and compulsion.
Yeah, obsession.
Like, why somebody has to see something through, even if it is at a detriment to
killing them,
or they're losing money, or like perfectionism and
giving up your fee just because you want to get it
done. That you don't want to
something.
compromise on your vision. And I mean, that also is very relatable to, I think, filmmaking in general, right? Like the metaphor of, you want to make the thing that you have in your head and make it the version of it, and you don't want to compromise. And
Corbett
filmmaking
stuff has felt like that. All three of them has felt like these uncompromising visions, not in like a bad
tragedy
way.
Too, right? Like the idea of like a school shooting at the beginning of Vox Lux, and how that's exploited, and then we have here, a man that's coming out of tragedy and trying to rebuild himself and pick up the pieces and deal with the pain, the physical pain of what he's gone through, and addiction, and loss, and that being taken advantage of from, wealthy white privileged men and, an estate, and so how that kind of plays out. But yeah, you have this story of a man that will, wants to do something and needs to see it through to the very end.
Yeah.
And it has to be
his way.
And to the point where he will fight everybody on it. You have someone like Jonathan Hyde, who's probably best known to a lot of people. He's in Titanic, but he's also in The Mummy and Anaconda, playing kind of like the middleman. Joe Alwyn kind of usurps Adrian Brody's character at any point possible. He's playing Guy Pearce's son.
Alwyn's been working with good directors.
Yeah, and Stacey Martin's another regular of Brady Corbet as well.
Yeah,
and Raffi Cassidy. So you have these actors that are being used in very interesting ways and very memorable ways that push boundaries and will test you and feels like it feels like it is capturing madness in terms of the way that someone feels about the obsessive nature of perfectionism and what it means to be completely integrated and obsessed with your work,
and how someone can take advantage of that too, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's the classic thing of treating someone like a commodity and then using them and then spitting them out afterwards.
Yeah.
And, we see this in many films, especially when it comes to like the Hollywood star system as well.
Yeah, and we even talked about that after, like, off air, being like how, we even just mentioned it with Brady Corbet being an uncompromising vision, and how this, even you could make the metaphor to filmmaking, and just even we mentioned the American dream and just chewing you up or spitting you out, and I think it's just done so excellently, and I hope this movie, again, like I started, like, puts him on the map in the sense people go back to Vox Lux, which is a little bit more of a divisive kind of movie, and then go back to Childhood of a Leader, which I think has a good... I mean, Joel Alwyn, I was just going to compare to, maybe not on the same level, but as Robert Pattinson, who, goes, okay, I'm going to try to work with, like, really good directors and learn. And
yeah,
Brady Corbet working with Michael Haneke and probably, I don't know, we don't know.
Yeah, Mia Hansen-Love and Ruben Östlund and people like that, and he does seem to have European sensibilities in terms of how he portrays things as cynical and cold and humorous at times, but darkly so, to the point where he will explore elements that will provoke people and push them and change how you feel about characters and present them in ways that you think somebody based on spending a good hour and a half with them, but then you see something really horrific and you're like, it changes how you see that character, and it's not out of left field because they are setting things up early on, but it takes a little while to get there, but it earns the length, even though maybe it could have been shorter, but I feel like everything in this movie, you talked about pacing, is earned in terms of the payoffs and the pathos of character arcs, but story building and just the foundation as a whole kind
and
of
even the length
solid.
That you cover in the movie, right? Like, it is an epic, decade-spanning kind of epic where you don't want to skim over some of that stuff too. And I am,
because you might lose something in just like a little moment of minutia, or like a conversation that maybe isn't necessarily essential to the story, but it does give you a little bit more into the setting or the environment or the time. Like, there are these sequences that are almost like newsreels, right? That tell you like what's going on in Pennsylvania and talking about like industry, right? Being America being a leader in industry and
reminded
production.
Me of one of my favorite movies that I talk about a lot, Man with a Movie Camera, because it's about kind of the industrial kind of revolution and stuff too. And like, there's a couple montages in this that really reminded me of that movie with the editing and the kind of almost stop, like framey, kind of not stop motion, but you know what I mean? Like just editing techniques and stuff I thought was really interesting. Even with the music sounded like, I know Man with a Movie Camera has a bazillion different scores depending on who decided to score it, that version that you watched. But
Man with a Movie Camera doesn't have a diamond transition.
No, which is great in this as well. And that's what I mean. Like, again, anyone who vibes with kind of the aesthetic that I like. I love chapter titles, and I like when those chapter titles are overly designed. I love credit sequences, and I love them when they're overly designed.
I like how he shoots
and,
someone
like,
driving on a road.
Oh my god, he
too.
loves that, dude. All three of his films, he loves that that shot on the front of a car or a front of a train. That's like almost like a not a drone or a helicopter shot.
It's almost
but
it's almost like a dolly or something
yeah,
like that. Like when he set
when
it
you
up
attach
on
it
a car,
on the car
yeah,
and it's just shooting the road in front of you, and
Yeah.
like
it's like his version of a Lynch thing, where Lynch always shoots
Yes,
highways, right?
yes,
And
where-
in darkness usually.
where I think all three of his films has had that exact shot in there, right? Like he loves it as an establishing shot, and that overture that he always puts in, which is again something that I love, that utilizes the score really well, but then sets the movie up perfectly. Like I don't know, I as a guy who doesn't really read, like, but I love chapter-based storytelling in movies, and
Well, it
I
does
love
feel
this-
like a novel.
It does, and it just feels. I love the structure of it, and it gives you these little breaks just for like how you can remember a movie in your mind, because like I don't know, like it just helps me in the sense of having this only really has two parts: an intermission, an overture, and an epilogue. But just that structure, I just really kind of fuck with, and I feel like if you are going to make a movie, and a movie that's going to be this long, like I appreciate that 15-minute intermission. It's just that little bit of a break where you can go to the bathroom, you can talk to the person beside you, and just have like, if you're gonna a 3-hour plus movie is exhausting, and
Yeah.
it is hard. We all have the attention spans of a fucking
Of a TikToker.
yeah, like it's just I'm sorry, that's the reality of things now. But if you tell me, I'll watch any movie that's over 3 hours. If you go at an hour and a half, you get a little 15-minute break,
Yeah.
and I go fantastic. I'll see 4 movies.
And it has
in
it's a
day.
countdown too, which is
I
even
know,
better.
it's great, and it's just a photo. But it adds style to your movie too. You bake it in. It's not like it goes black and you're like, come back in 15 minutes, and it's
And
like,
it ends at the right time, I think, too. Like he knows when to cut to that intermission.
Oh,
like it's
that's-
simply just like, oh, like this is where we should do it for time.
I want to do a
It makes
YouTube
sense.
channel where I only just create intermissions in movies at the perfect point, and just like have the music go into like a.
Well, because even when you're watching, like back in the days when you'd watch cable and you would watch a movie on TV, I always found the cuts to commercials to be somewhat jarring, and I always wanted to
in
know
movies, yeah.
Yeah, I always wanted to know like where the bumper, like why they would cut there, and was it
Even
just
in-
simply a time thing?
Even in streaming, I feel like it's still random and shitty. Like I have the ad tier on Netflix, and they still haven't figured it out. Like they have, even Disney's doing this too, where they cut in the ad breaks now, which is better than not building in the ad breaks, because then it does cut at random times. But even the thing that they do now, it's just like it feels like it messed up, like it freezes for a second and then cuts to a random Big Arch commercial from McDonald's or some shit, where this is when it's just well thought out, right? Like his movies, you can tell the architecture metaphor, right? Like the architect metaphor is like, I think that's why I love this guy, and he's one of my favorite working filmmakers. It's
Well,
just like,
he's definitely
feels like-
now going to be probably sought out, and like whatever he does after this will be one of the most anticipated.
You'll have
films.
actors reaching out to him wanting to be in his movie. Like I really do think that this is going to be that movie, and I'm not saying other directors don't do that. It's a style preference thing, right? Not everyone's gonna vibe with this kind of style too. They're gonna think it's overly stylized.
Well, even the length,
and
I think,
stuff.
is going to
like
be a
it's-
problem, not just in terms of the length for people to sit and watch it, but for exhibitors, like what kinds of theaters are going to play The Brutalist if it does become commercial to an extent, or an
I don't
awards
think it
movie.
will, but like I do
think like obviously like the Lightbox will probably get it
I
again
love it
once
and
it gets
hope it does,
distribution in
but-
North America, but you do wonder, like if it does, like for example, if it gets some Oscar nominations, that does change things in terms of, like in Canada, will Cineplex or Landmark play it, and in the US, will you get a Regal or AMC playing it?
I think you'll get it in limited release,
or it'll be like 2 screenings a day.
excuse me. Yeah, and I think we saw it on 35 millimeter. I'll say that, and then it's playing 70 mil, shot 65, playing 70. And I think when it comes out, you'll see it play at those cinemas around that can project it on 70 millimeters. So here in Toronto, you'll have it at Lightbox and probably Varsity has a 70 millimeter projector, so I think it'll be like that kind of thing where it's only playing on like one screen in your city, and then if it opens a little bit wider, even digitally, I think it'll still have that intermission baked in. I think, yeah, it's only gonna have 2 showings a day, 3 showings a day, maybe, but like, it's not going to be a super accessible movie. Like,
No.
I do think film fans will go see it, maybe, and even more so than something like Vox Lux or Childhood of a Leader. But yeah, man, like, it's just, I'm trying to think of what else to talk about, but there's so much that it's like, also, I just want to say, just go see it, like, if you can. Like, you can get into the kind of minutia of the 4 hours we watched, but I just think it has fantastic performances, fantastic style. The score is great. It looks amazing. One of the best movies of the year. And just, I'm so happy that this guy, whose first 2 films I really loved, but I felt like they kind of just went under the radar, or his style's just not going to be your thing. Like, I know a lot of people didn't like Vox Lux, or it was in that Natalie Portman era where she was doing a lot of accents that people didn't love either.
And I do feel like
that movie rocks, though.
It's great, and I think it's nearly like it would be a classic if there was just like one song in that soundtrack that popped, or it'd get more people.
I'd like to
see
give it another watch, and I think I will now
Yeah.
after this, because like I've only seen it the one time.
But he's also doing things in this film that he does in Vox Lux in terms of playing with characters, in terms of ages and and things
which
like that.
Fun.
And it's really interesting to see this guy come into his own, and it feels like a movie. You know, we already mentioned it, like uncompromising, and it just feels not old-fashioned in a dated way, but old-fashioned in like classic movie making that doesn't come around too often anymore. And when it does, the people that are making these movies are the Paul Thomas Andersons or Scorsese's or Tarantino's, because they can afford to make.
So it's so great seeing a younger guy who probably likes a lot of those, filmmakers, who's even worked with, people that are connected to those people. And you can see that, like, someone who, it's just so exciting when someone young like this comes in and you're like, it's only his 3rd film and he'll be around for a long time.
Yeah, you hope. Again, I don't know what this doesn't have distribution in North America.
Are you sure? Because
Focus Features and Universal are releasing it internationally.
So the Universal thing was at the international thing still? I'm surprised they wouldn't just be like, oh, we'll just release it. But
I don't know
how that works. Or
I don't. Yeah.
But you might see like a A24 and
Sony Pictures Classics or something like that. Pick it up, but it will probably be an indie label. Like, it wouldn't be Universal here or Warner Brothers or something like that. Like, it is too much of an art house film still, even though it is sort of going to probably be that welcoming party movie that kind of gets more people to pay attention to his past work, but also anticipate what's next.
I do think, I don't know if he'll ever make something super accessible, but I hope he doesn't. I hope he commits to whatever the hell he wants to do.
Because if this movie was released in the 70s or even in the early 80s, like before the studio system kind of closed the doors on auteur filmmakers after Heaven's Gate, this would kind of be that critically acclaimed film that I think would play in multiplexes, because there was a time when multiplexes played this
still
stuff.
Might, man. Maybe people will go, oh fuck, we haven't gotten something like this in a while, or it'll feel like a PTA movie or something like that.
Yeah, if someone like Scorsese sees it and champions it, and
that's what I mean. I really hope that happens. And I had a point in my head that I was going to say, and I forgot it. I'll get back to it, but. This kind of doesn't make sense, but it sort of does. It reminds me of, and I don't want to, hyperbole is real during festivals, just deal with it, people, okay? I'm going to give you a little hyperbole. When we saw Everything Everywhere All at Once, and the Daniels who just made the Farting Corpse movie beside that, which a lot of people liked, very stylized, but it was very much them and their uncompromising vision, right? But then they make something like Everything Everywhere that you're like, oh, fuck, they, took it to the next level really still stayed true to what they liked and what they are good at and their style and their vision and stuff like that. And then this feels sort of in that same realm where he'd made two things before that people liked or had its hardcore fans or whatever, but then you make something that I think will put you on a stage where, like we said, if it does get Oscar nominations and stuff like that, people will go, who the fuck is this guy? Oh, it's the guy from these movies who's now directing shit. Oh, he made 2 other movies. Like,
and it's aggressive too. Like, I think like in the first like 10 minutes of the movie, it tells you everything you need to know about its stance on America at this specific period in time. Like the way that we see the Statue of Liberty in this amazing single take.
That single take is awesome. Kick it off. Yeah.
You know, like we've seen that image before of immigrants coming over from Europe.
Yeah, like Ellis Island and stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, taking the ferry. But like even something like another movie I thought of that isn't as successful, but kind of feels like it's almost in the same kind of vein as being a muscular project that a director has a very specific vision of, is something like James Gray's The Immigrant.
Yeah.
You know, where I don't think that movie works per se, but like there's something deliberate about how almost miserable it is, and it shows it in a way that's both cinematic, but in like terms of not realistic, but it's not trying to sugarcoat that it was kind of awful, and then even like after Brody gets off the boat, like what he does right afterwards, it kind of gives you like this interesting sense of like there's a seediness to it. There's a quality of like a
yes, you're giving someone a new opportunity and stuff like that, but there is kind of I totally agree with that. I think you guys should absolutely go see this when it comes out.
When it gets distribution.
Yeah, hopefully does. Or if you live in Europe, you could go see it through Universal and Focus Features. But I really do think it will.
It will. I mean, everything.
I'm surprised it didn't because it played Venice, right?
Well, like, these things take time though too.
Or Telluride. No, Venice.
Venice.
Right?
Venice. Yeah. These things do take time in terms of not only distribution, but just making those contracts work. And I know like TIFF is really focused on being a buyer's market.
That's true. Where, you know, Venice, it already had international distribution, right?
Yeah.
So I wouldn't be, and it hasn't even premiered here yet. We should say that as well. It's tomorrow, correct? Or
yeah.
by the time you're listening
so
to
we
this,
saw the P&I screening, and this was following the very positive acclaim and reception that it got at Venice. Yeah. So this is probably the time when we'll find out. Like,
did they announce the Golden Bear yet?
I don't think they did.
Yeah, so by the time you're listening to this, you never know.
We'll probably find out. It's actually funny because James Gray is actually a jury member. James Gray's a jury member on Venice, so I could see
full circle.
But I could see him like not liking it because it's on like it's like, oh, is he trying to make a movie that's better than
I don't
film?
know.
That happens though.
Yeah.
Like there was a conversation this year about that where Deborah Granick, who directed Leave No Trace, apparently did not like Good One, India Donaldson's movie, because it was
too similar.
And it's like you're stomping on my territory.
That's interesting. But yeah, we'll keep you guys posted probably in our TIFF wrap episode if it gets distribution and what happens at Venice.
Yeah, because Vox Lux got picked up by Neon.
So I could see
right after we saw it.
I could see that happening again. Like, Neon does seem like a good fit,
although I don't know if he was happy with Neon. With
how they
Vox
released. Yeah,
Lux.
that's true because again, it did kind of come and go without really being.
They didn't push it really in any way for
true
awards.
Too. That's fair. We'll see. But thank you all for listening. We really do appreciate it. You can go check out our other review that we have up right now, which is for the Mike Flanagan's The Life of Chuck. We'll also have reviews up for, not technically a TIFF film, but we did see The Apprentice, the Donald Trump movie with Sebastian Stan and Jeremy Strong, which we'll have a review for. Big films like Anora and Conclave, as well as We Live in Time, and things like that. So over the next couple days, you'll get reviews for all of those films, as well as everything else we see over the next 10 days.
Oh, God.
Or 9 days? I don't even know. It's only day 2. But we saw a bunch beforehand, and we're seeing a bunch now. But thank you all again. Please go check out all of our stuff over on Letterboxd, which is Untitled_movies. Shout out to everyone we've bumped into. Always love TIFF because you see a lot of Eric and I can't walk 10 feet without being stopped.
We're
you know?
TIFF famous.
God, not really.
No, no one gives a shit.
Yeah, but go follow all of my tweets and shit over on Twitter and other social medias at Matt Rohrbeck. Follow Eric at EM6211. We're tweeting out, initial reactions to all the films that we see during the festival, and then you'll get the full conversations over here.
Yeah.
That's it for today. So until next time.
Okay, so literally there's a scene in this movie where Guy Pearce's library is being renovated, and if this was taking place in modern times, it would be a Blu-ray collection, and it would be called The Bluterist.
God, I hate that. Okay, bye everybody.